everyone, I'm Rezi from Lowell Observatory, and this is this week's Mars Hill Almanac. Let's go ahead and get started with the sun. The sun sets at about 7:40 p.m. here in Flagstaff tonight. The sun is setting later and later every night as we come up on the summer solstice. The moon rises very full, but just starting to wane shortly after sunset at about 8 p.m. here in Flagstaff. By next week, the moon should be well into its waning phase at about a half moon phase. Mercury is up at sunset about 20 degrees above the horizon after the sun sets, which means that it will make a good binocular or telescope target early in the evening. It will set, however, by 9 p.m. Jupiter rises at 10:30 with its parade of planets, Saturn, Mars, and even Neptune, if you have a telescope, trailing behind it over the next 3 hours. Last week we talked briefly about Vega, using it to find Hercules. This week we're going to talk about Vega and the constellation that it lays in, which is Lyra. The star Vega is easy to spot this time of year because it is by far the brightest star rising in the northeast part of the sky. The constellation Lyra is shaped like a lyre, a type of harp. Vega makes up the top bit, and then just under it you'll see this little diamond shape, which makes up the rest of the constellation. It is a small constellation, but it is an important constellation. Vega is also a very important star. We compare the brightnesses of all other stars using a system of magnitude, which just shows how bright a star is compared to Vega. Vega also makes up a third of the very popular asterism, the Summer Triangle, which we'll talk about more next week. For your deep sky challenge this week, we're going to talk about a couple of very interesting objects inside the constellation Lyra. First of which is this star right over here. This is epsilon Lyrae, which is also known as the double-double. Looking at this star with the naked eye, you will only see one star of a moderate brightness near Vega. However, if you point binoculars to this star, you'll be able to see that it is in fact a binary system. And through binoculars and most telescopes, you will see two stars. If you have access to a very nice telescope in a clear sky, you can actually resolve that each of the two stars that you see through binoculars in epsilon Lyrae is another binary system. So with your naked eye you see one star, with binoculars and most telescopes you see two, and with a nice telescope you see 4 stars in this one little point in the sky. If the double-double is easy for you, we can go ahead and take a look at the Ring Nebula, which you will need a decent-sized telescope to see. So looking over here, back at the constellation Lyra, towards that diamond shape underneath Vega. These two stars here are Chelyabinsk and Sulfat. And right between them, if you have a good, fairly large telescope on a clear night with good observing conditions, you can spot the Ring Nebula. Through a telescope, it's going to look like a gray ring. However, if you do astrophotography, you can do a long exposure image on the Ring Nebula and see all of these beautiful rainbow colors. Now, my personal favorite thing about Lyra as a constellation is that it has been hugely influential on science fiction for such a small piece of the sky. Vega is the star that Jodie Foster visits in Contact. Growing up, my favorite book series had a protagonist named Lyra, likely because of this constellation, and Star Trek even mentions the star Chelyabinsk. So we want to hear from you, and this week I specifically want to hear about that intersection between science, specifically astronomy, and science fiction. What are some of your favorite fun facts about your favorite science fiction pieces of media, whether that be books or movies or even comic books that tie in real-world science and astronomy? Go ahead and leave us a comment. We'll be picking our favorite and posting it in next week's update. Until then, my name is Rezi, and this has been this week's Mars Hill Almanac. I look forward to hearing from you next week.